Hello, everyone. I'm Harvey Brownstone, and today's guest is a self-made man whose remarkable journey from his humble beginnings and turbulent childhood in England to a highly successful international business career is the subject of his inspiring new book entitled One of a Kind, Making Things Happen. Our guest never knew his father and lost his mother at the age of 5, having met her only 3 times in his life. At the age of 8, he was ripped away from the only loving caregiver he'd ever had, his beloved foster mother, whom he called Auntie. He was forced to live with his abusive stepfather, only to be sent to an orphanage the next year. When he was finally placed in a loving home, his adoptive parents passed away, leaving him orphaned for a second time. He ended up in a boarding school and then completed a 5-year engineering apprenticeship, ultimately leading to a hugely successful career at Alfa Laval and Tetra Pak as head of global customer service operations. His work took him all over the world. His experience in business and in life is diverse and impressive. He was a professional singer. He owned and operated a wine bar in West London. He ran a perfume company, then developed a computer program that was used in the field of optometry, and then he ran the biggest glove production company in America and was instrumental in improving uniform apparel and gloves for the US military. And now he's a co-founder of Britain Publishing and a successful author of numerous books, including Sabato, The Untold Story, co-authored with Antonio Sabato Jr., and Liberty versus Tyranny, co-authored with retired Colonel Andrew P. O'Mara Jr., and He's a Funny Cat, Miss High, My 32 Years Singing with James Brown, co-authored with Martha High. I'm delighted to welcome Tony Moore to our show. Tony, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here.
Tony, tell us why you decided to write this memoir.
Well, I found myself telling people stories about my life, and no one knew anything about my past. And as I was telling the stories, they're saying, yeah, right, you really did that? And I'm saying, well, yes, I did. And so in the end, I decided that there were so many stories that were in the background, and I kept my life very, very private. In London, I had a lot of police friends, and believe me, Harvey, they tried to find out if there was anything in my background. They couldn't, because my records were sealed, because I was part of the London County Council child care system. So all my childhood records were sealed. So in the end, I decided to start writing my memoir. And I called it One of a Kind because I really saw myself as one of a kind, a survivor. And I know that there are many survivors out there, and we're not all wired the same way. And it doesn't make us good or bad. But I wanted to write something that would motivate people when they read it to try and do their best, to try and succeed in their own lives. And that was the reason I wrote my book.
Tony, as I mentioned in my introduction, you had quite a traumatic childhood, and you've certainly had your share of challenges in your career. But you wrote that you believe in listening to that little voice inside you that guides you. Tell us how you tune into that voice.
It takes a long time because, as I describe, there is the noise of life, everything going on around you. But I found that when I didn't listen, things happened that I didn't particularly like or didn't expect to happen. So I started to listen to it, and it's not up here in your head. It's right down here in your middle. And it's softer than a whisper. And Harvey, I've spoken of this to many people and said to them, do you ever hear that little voice? They say, yeah. And I think, well, do you ever listen to it? And they say, sometimes. I can only think that it comes with experience of tuning into it, tuning in and letting it help you. And whatever that voice is, I can't answer to that. But what I do know is that I listen to it whenever I can hear it. And it seems to guide me very well.
I've had exactly the same experience. I couldn't agree more. You wrote that on 3 separate occasions in your life, you've had dreams that warned you that something was going to happen. And those dreams helped you deal with the situation. Tell us about that.
Yes, I didn't know it at the time. But the strange thing was that I knew when I was having the dreams that I was being told something. I can't explain it, Harvey, but I knew that I was being told something. One of the dreams was I'm sitting in a courtyard, a brightly lit, sunny courtyard. And it's got sloping walls either side of me. And ahead of me is the ocean. And the ocean is getting worse and worse. It's broiling, and there is a mass of broiling black water with clouds forming. And I didn't count them, but I knew that there were 13 tornadoes headed my way. And the tornadoes came right up to me within, I don't know, 15 feet, and they were massive. They blocked out the sky. And I knew I was being told something. And what I was being told was that it's going to be okay. Don't worry. Everything is going to be all right. Well, we had a problem with our son. Sadly, he was on drugs at the time. He's fine now. And some of the things that occurred in our life caused us to file Chapter 13. And so I knew when we were doing this, that I had already been warned that everything would be okay. And it was. We went through it because we loved our son, and we still do. And we had to go through them. The next dream that I had, it's the strangest thing. I'm camping between two tall buildings, and I'm in a little tent, and there's like a grassy verge between the two buildings where perhaps another building could have been. And there was one of my work colleagues standing there staring at me, not saying anything. And I said, "Hi, Hank, how are you?" And he just turned around and walked away. What happened was I refused to move with my company to Chicago. And they said, "We're going to give you an option. You either move to Chicago or you leave the company." So I chose the latter. And as I closed the door on the meeting, thought, great, I'm going to have a whole new career. I walked past this guy, Hank's office, and he closed the door. And I knew then that that was what I was being told. And from that moment on, my life just took off. I did all sorts of new things. So they're two of the three dreams. And the thing is that when you have these dreams, you know you're being told something. You don't know what it is, but it kind of lodges it somewhere in the back of your mind, and you just leave it there for further reference. And that's what happened.
Tony, you also had a profoundly spiritual experience in church that gave you definitive proof that God exists. What exactly happened?
Yes, I was in church and I really wasn't feeling it. The strangest thing, I'm up on the balcony. There was over 1,000 people in this church. And then, unlike the English churches, there's a big screen with all the words of all the songs that they're going to sing. And it's almost like a ping pong ball, showing people what to sing. And I was thinking to myself, I don't feel it today. I don't feel I belong here. And I'm up on the balcony and it's packed. And I look around behind me and there is an exit. And I'm thinking, I don't belong here. I wonder if I leave now, would people think that I'm going downstairs to set something up for the meetings afterwards? Or would they know I'm leaving? But I know one thing, I don't belong here. And as I thought that, a feeling washed like fingers came down through my hair, all the way down, brushed down past my face. And this voice inside me said, "You do belong here, Tony, you belong." And it's the strangest thing because I didn't know what happened. And I'm looking around at the people thinking, is there a great big bright light above my head? It was so silly. But I knew what it was. I was being told that someone up there knows me and knows who I am. It was the most amazing feeling.
Is it fair to say that you believe in a divine presence in all of our lives?
Yes, it is. And I say it's God. Other people say I believe in a divine presence. But the thing is, nothing else has explained everything that we have. Nothing. And so for me, and I don't convince other people, but for me, I do believe. And I also believe we're given divine gifts, but we'll talk about that in the book.
Did you always believe in destiny and that things would always turn out for the best, even when you were a child?
No. The funny thing is, Harvey, that I never thought about those things. I was too busy living life for the moment. When my adopted parents died, I didn't know what to do. I had no concept of whether I was going to be, sent back into an orphanage or a children's home. I just lived life for the moment. And that really guided me through. And in doing that, I didn't worry about anything. I never worried about what my future was going to be because there was too much happening in the present. And I say to other people that I've spoken to, when bad things happen, it doesn't mean it's the end of the world. You pick yourself up and you move on. And that's how I guess I've survived all these years to be what other people would say is a success.
But you do believe in destiny, correct?
Yes, I do.
Well, even though you believe in destiny, you obviously believe in working hard and setting goals and making solid plans to bring about success, correct?
Yes, absolutely. You can't wander in all directions. Otherwise, any road will take you nowhere.
You wrote that you've always worked extremely hard to get ahead, to prove yourself. Who were you trying to prove yourself to?
Wow, that's a question. I think I was always worried at the back of my mind that I would fail at something. And in failing, I've got nobody else to lean on, nobody to ask questions to. So I think I was trying to prove to myself that nothing that ever happened to me was going to stop me from succeeding. And I guess in answer to your question, I was really trying to prove it to myself.
Now, Tony, your book is a very intimate account of your difficult youth and your career ups and downs and your family life. Was writing the book therapeutic for you?
Actually, no. People have said that to me, it must have been therapeutic. Believe it or not, Harvey, I was quite happy. Well, I am quite happy with my life. I feel that I've done a lot of things. And I felt as I was writing it, I'm writing it for other people to read and to be motivated. It wasn't as a therapeutic thing for me because I had never really felt down in the dumps at anything that happened. Yes, temporarily, but not permanently. I'm not wired that way. It's not how many times we fall down. It's how many times we can pick ourselves up. And as long as that math is +1, that we pick ourselves up one more time than we fell down, we're going to succeed.
Throughout the book, after each episode in your life that you wrote about, you identified a lesson that you learned from that experience. I can see you're a big believer in learning from every life experience, good and bad, right?
Yes, I do believe that. And a lot of people say, why is this happening to me? They're not happening to you. It's the way life is. And life isn't always fair, as we know. I'm now writing about many different people. And I look at it that their lives are important too. And if I don't write their stories, who will? The stories are beautiful. Antonio, for example, what a guy. People only know him, his face, his body. The book behind that is incredible. The things that happened to him, a murder, his grandmother was murdered, his mother was held as a child hostage at 8 years old in Prague. And they fled to Italy. Their house was firebombed while he was 7 years old. These are incredible stories. And so I feel privileged that they reach out to me and ask me to write their story. So I'm sharing their life. And all the books I write are motivating to other people. That's why I write them. Honestly, that book, we're like a kindred spirit. Antonio is so hardworking. He learned to speak English, listening to Tom Cruise in Top Gun, and he must have watched it over 100 times. He has no Italian accent. And it's just one of the stories. He is a terrific person, and we are very good friends.
Now, Tony, after a very successful international sales and marketing career, you and your wife decided to move to America. You wrote that you always knew you would end up in America one day. How did you know that?
The strangest thing, I'm at school in London, and every time we had geography, we had a big atlas. Books are free, by the way, in England. So I had a big atlas, and I opened the atlas up, and it was always to the United States of America. And I'm 11 years old at the time. And I just looked at these names, St. Louis, and places like Denver And they were names that came up in the Westerns that I used to watch. And I used to imagine, and I used to just travel to those places in my mind. I don't think I ever learned anything in geography, but I certainly learned about America. And when I reflected on moving here, I knew that that was going to be my destiny. And for people that come from Europe, you embrace America, you embrace the culture, and you will do very, very well.
Now, Tony, I was dumbfounded to read that you had the worst possible nightmare situation with a headhunter that I've ever heard of. If I understood your book correctly, you went to a headhunter to look for another job, and the headhunter sent your resume to the company you were already working for by mistake. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. And the way I found, because you sense when something is going wrong in your career or your marriage or other things, you're getting so many warning shots. And a lot of people wait, and it's like the frog in the boiling water. You know, put a frog in boiling water, he'll jump out, but leave him in water that's cold and gradually heat it up. He'll stay there till he dies. And so I saw that as writing on the wall, because my boss went to take over the company in Sweden. He's now running a $7 billion company. And in his words, I was the only entrepreneur or intrapreneur in the company of 35,000 employees. What happened was I sensed that when he left, things were going bad. My boss just didn't want to work with me. So I started looking around for another job. And the human resources director put a piece of paper in front of me and said, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And I'm reading it, and he's blanked out my name at the top. I'm going, wow, this guy is really good. And I'm being stupid. And he said, "Yes, it's you." And I was shocked, because now the cat was out of the bag. But it turned out very, very well. I was reading my own resume.
Now, as you explained in the book, although you were initially fired because of the headhunter incident, you ended up being hired back and promoted to an even higher position. But your reaction to being fired was really quite remarkable, Tony. You said, and I'm quoting you here, "I was elated at the chance of having a whole new career in an entirely new business." Tony, where did you get this incredible confidence from?
Well, I knew that I had succeeded. I don't want to tell too many stories from the book, but I had created and developed a marketing strategy in the company, and it took off extremely well. So being fired for me was just a stepping stone to another career. And I knew, well, if I can do it in a company that's $7 billion and that's in 150 countries worldwide, I can do it anywhere. And it didn't faze me at all. And so I was actually looking forward to leaving and starting in a new direction.
That's just amazing. And most people would be panicking. And here you were seeing this as a door closing and another door opening.
That's correct. That's how I've seen all the bad events in my past. I literally close that door in my mind and I move on.
I want to ask you about another really pivotal event in your career. In 1997, you were fired from Tetra Pak for refusing to relocate from Greenwood, Indiana to Kenosha, Wisconsin. You then had some rough times in your career that are all explained in the book. My question for you is this: given the financial hardship you went through after leaving Tetra Pak, did you ever regret your decision to refuse to relocate to Wisconsin?
I questioned myself many times, but then I kept on reflecting to the way in which that company was running. So Alfa Laval is a worldwide company and it's $7 billion company. Tetra Pak is also a $7 billion company involved in making kids drink boxes and aseptic packaging. When the two companies merged, the nature of the company changed. And I did many presentations around the US, introducing Alfa Laval to Tetra Pak, who had just acquired them. In those presentations, I knew this was never going to work. Just because they're two $7 billion companies that have joined. And my previous boss, a guy called Bo Verzane, he became chairman and CEO of both companies. He really did well, but he was also my supporter. And when I reflected on leaving the company, I knew it wasn't the company that I joined. It had changed. And this happens so many times. So no, I didn't regret it. I never regretted it.
Now, as I mentioned in my introduction, you've had some very impressive jobs in your career. I want to ask you about your definition of success. You wrote that at one point, you defined success as having a home with a lawn so big that you needed a riding lawnmower to cut it. How do you find success now?
That's a very interesting story. It was the first time my aunt, who came to my wedding, so we'd been married for 30 years, she asked me a very deep question. How do you measure success, Tony? What is the thing that you will have that will tell you you're successful? I couldn't answer the question. She said, well, let me help you. And honestly, Harvey, she was the stuff that the British Empire was made on. She drove an MG midget till she was 87. She bought it when she was 75. And it was a soft top convertible. And she said to me, well, let me help you. Do you want £1 million? Do you want to be a millionaire? Do you want a big boat on the ocean? Do you want to have a big mansion in the country? What is the thing that you'll have? I couldn't answer her. But a few months later, I'm mowing my grass and I've got a London house. And so it's got a small lawn at the back. People here call it a yard. Well, for me, a yard is 36 inches, but that's just me. And so I'm mowing the lawn. And I thought, what if I had a house that had a garden that was so big, I had to have a tractor lawnmower to mow my grass? My perception was living in London. No one has a garden that big, except maybe the Queen. But then when we moved to America, to the States, I'm standing on my driveway, waiting for the truck to arrive with our goods. And I gave my wife, Sue, a box with 3 buttons on it. And it was a garage door opener. She didn't know what it was, because we don't have those in London. And so I said, press that button there, and the big garage door will open. As she did it, sitting in the middle of the garage was a Ryder lawnmower with a note on it from the predecessors saying, dear Mr. and Mrs. Moore, we hope that you will keep a good home for this. We bought a new one. And at that moment, that was 3 years after I put down my dream, my vision of success, that I had reached what I perceived to be successful. And it's the strangest thing. It was never £1 million or dollars. It was never money. It was never wealth. It was never a mansion, never a boat on the ocean. It was just that. And in writing it down, something changed and I got my dream.
Well, you've had a long marriage and you've raised 4 children. I think one very important measure of success, Tony, is that you've given your children a much better childhood than you had. That's monumental, don't you think?
Yes, that was one of my determinations. And I wanted them to have what I didn't have. I have 2 daughters living in London. They're both doing very well. They're actually Reiki healers, if you can believe that, which is 180 degrees away from me being a trained engineer. And my 2 sons here, one of them we had problems with. He's great now. He's doing very, very well. We're so proud of him. The other one, James, he just opened a club in downtown Indianapolis called Almost Famous. And I said, James, this is you. This is what you were destined to be, running businesses like this. So yes, I'm very, very happy with them.
You're one of the co-founders of Britain Publishing. Why did you decide to start a publishing company?
Well, honestly, that was Antonio's fault. I wrote the book about Antonio Sabato. And originally, I was going to give it the title Trumped Up Hollywood, because after he supported Donald Trump in 2016, he was dropped. He was blacklisted by Hollywood. But as we wrote the book, I realized that was just one part of Antonio's life. So we called it Sabato, the Untold Story. And it was really, we tried to get the book published and we couldn't get it published because it was leaning to the right. It was really supporting right at the beginning Donald Trump, but that wasn't what the story was about. So my 2 partners, Brinker Raw and Rob Lowe, I said, well, the hell with it. Why don't we just start our own publishing company? So we did. That afternoon, by 3 p.m. that afternoon, we had Brighton Publishing, which is Brinker and Tony joined together. And we started publishing books. Honestly, it was a doozy. People were reaching out to us and asking us to publish their books. it was a perfect next step for us all.
Tony, one of the most heart-wrenching parts of your book, which you've already referred to in this interview, is the chapter dealing with your son Nicky's drug addiction and the incredible ordeal you all went through as a family to help him. Tony, do you have any advice for other parents who might be going through a crisis like this with one of their kids?
Well, only from my own experiences, and I'm not here to convince other people the rights and wrongs, but I think that people don't understand the true nature of addiction. I was a US correspondent for a UK radio show. And one of the interviews that I did was Dr. Eric Davis, who is chairman and CEO of the Indiana Addiction Counselors Association. So I did an interview with him. We talked about the nature of addiction and how it rewires the brain. And all I can say to people is read up about this, because if it was that simple, I hear so many people say, well, just choose to stop. If it was that easy, would we have addiction? It changes your brain, and addiction is triggered. Something triggered it with Nicky. And believe it or not, it was the most innocuous thing. He had Stephen Johnson syndrome. He had blisters over 97% of his body. His body was a mass of blisters and sores. He was lying on a gurney in the hospital, and every single specialist from internal, skin, hair, everyone was there. And they were all making a diagnosis. And on that gurney, he was dying. And we were there watching him die. And they gave him morphine. And immediately the morphine touched his body. It triggered his addiction. And even though, people don't want to accept that, that is exactly what happened. And there are triggers, and addiction is the same. So my message to all of you dealing with your children, stay with them, don't drop them. Stay with them and give them your support. They need it desperately. The other thing I can say is this. When they look in a mirror, do you think they're happy with what they see? They're not happy. They know what they look like. It's the most dreadful, devastating thing. And so all I can say is get the help. In the new book I'm writing, Convenient Lies, I've said 50 years, the war on drugs, we've spent trillions. Why are they still pouring in? If we had spent 10% of that money on addiction counseling and help, it would have had more of an effect than just pretending that we're fighting a war on drugs. We're really not.
I am so happy to hear you say that, Tony, because I spent 26 years in a courtroom as a judge, and a large percentage of our clientele were substance abuse addicts. And all the money that was spent in incarcerating them and prosecuting them did nothing to assist in the rehabilitation. We could have spent that money so much better doing exactly what you said with rehab, counseling. So thank you for saying that.
Well, it was a good question. And I mean this, it's from my heart. So many addicts, they don't know where to go. They can't get help. And so that interview that I did with Dr. Eric Davis, I've sent all over the world. When I read on places like Facebook or Instagram that someone is having a problem understanding this, I send out that interview and encourage them to watch it so that they can understand the nature of what they're dealing with. I hope that it helps them.
I hope so too. You wrote in your book that each of us in life is given a special talent or a divine tool, as you call it. What would you say your divine tools are?
Oh, wow. I think finally, at this stage in my life, my divine tool is to help to motivate people through writing other people's stories.
And your own.
And my own. That's what really started it. And people read it, and I got so many messages of encouragement. Professor Malcolm McDonald, who was my mentor, loved it so much. He said, the trouble with my books, Tony, is I've written 22, and once you pick them up, or once you put them down, you can't pick them back up. He said, your book, I couldn't put it down. So he then asked me to write a chapter in his 7th book on strategic planning. So I was very privileged. So when I saw the effect that it had with both academia and with ordinary people like myself, I realized that maybe I had a talent for writing. And I've now written 7 books. And I've got two more that I'm working on right now. The common theme all the way through them is that they have to be motivating. I want them to motivate other people with their stories. And that's why I write them.
If you could go back and change something about your life, is there anything that you would change?
I wouldn't have spent so long trying to be a professional singer. That's for damn sure. But I did, and it was a good experience. I think in hindsight, no, I wouldn't change anything, because each time I was knocked down, I picked myself up. And what happened after that was better than what it was before. And I can't explain it, but I can say it. The number of times that, I either lost my job, got fired, things like that. And yes, it was very difficult for the first couple of days after that. But then I looked forward and thought, well, this is great. I can do something else. And that's exactly what I did. So no, I don't think I would change anything. Money has never been my motivator. And in that being the case, we've always had enough to live on. We're fine. I think if you make money your God, then you'll spend your whole life chasing money. And I don't see that as healthy. So for me, no, I wouldn't change anything.
When I was preparing this interview, I was thinking about what is the key message that Tony wants people to get from reading his book. And for me, the key message was, if life knocks you down, pick yourself up, and chances are things will be better than they were before if you listen to that voice inside you, your instincts, your intuition.
I would agree 100%. And if that's what you got from my book, then that was the message that I really wanted to say. That's absolutely true. You asked me about divine gifts. And I think that we are given divine gifts. Some people say it was just a natural talent. It's a lot deeper than that. And you don't have to use your gifts. Mary at school was always looking after other kids when they fell over. Mary becomes a nurse. Tommy was always pulling things apart. He becomes an engineer or a mechanic or something like that. They're natural leanings that we're all born with. And people say it's just genes. I see it as a lot more than that. I think, though, we're given freedom, free will. So it's not necessary for us to be that person. But when we don't, life is so much harder. When we do use these skills, life is a doozy. It's like nothing happened. You're good at what you do and you enjoy it.
Amen to that. Well, Tony, a doctor named Jeff once told you that heroes are made from surviving adversity, not from having a blessed and easy life. Well, if that's true, then Tony, you're a real hero. Thank you so much for writing the book and for taking the time to appear on our show.
Thank you for the invite. It's an absolute pleasure.
And I hope you'll come back with all of your books. Each time you write one, please come back.
Well, let me finish with one thing. The book that I wrote with Martha High about her 32 years with James Brown, it's being made into a stage show and a musical. And it's going to be called He's a Funny Cat. It's opening a brand new theater in Virginia. And when we get that, when we get the date set up, I'll absolutely contact you, Harvey.
I would love that. Our guest has been author and publisher Tony Moore. My name is Harvey Brownstone. Thank you to our producer, Steve Silver. Thank you all for joining us. See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out all the great interviews on the Harvey Brownstone Interviews YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when new videos are posted.